holding scientific research and discovery in respect, as we should, we must also be alert to the equal and opposite danger that public policy could itself become the captive of a scientific, technological elite.
We've signed a climate convention on the importance of economic instruments and free markets. Were included in this mammoth Agenda 21 document and the Rio Declaration. Let me be clear on one fundamental point. The United States fully intends to be the world's preeminent leader in protecting the global environment.
Coming up, Technocracy News. And good morning. This is Patrick Wood for Technocracy News and Trends. Welcome to the broadcast today to all you listeners around the world. Today we're going again to talk about technocracy because that's what we do here. It is Technocracy News and Trends. And before I start on any of the stories today, by the way, this is Monday, May 20, 2019, I want to again drive the point home that technocracy is an economic system, not a political system. This has led to so much confusion in the world, in the media, with journalists, with writers who are trying to describe current events in all kinds of different ways. Unfortunately, missed the mark because technocracy, if they saw the big picture, is an economic system, not a political system. This is not a political issue. Although politics can affect economics, certainly they can. The original technocrats from the early 1930s had in mind to completely dismiss all the politicians. They wanted to dismiss Congress, send them all home. They wanted to get rid of basically all elected officials and simply appoint a hierarchy of engineers and scientists to run all of society. And what would they run society for? Well, to manage the economic system. In other words, the only reason they saw a need for leaders was to run the economic system. Well, this is not the way America works. America started out with a constitution that was a political document. It created a framework around which capitalism and free enterprise could operate. It offered protections to individuals that allowed them to own private property and to do things that would develop business and so on. And this is the way our country has developed over a period of time. Because of the protections we had with our political system, we were allowed to enjoy economic prosperity and to do things that allowed us to develop our own wealth and our own inheritance to pass down to our children and grandchildren and so on. Well, the early technocrats, again, wanted to completely do away with the system. They thought that capitalism, free enterprise, and the price-based economic system were completely inefficient, completely upside down in their mind, and they wanted to create an economic system based on resources, not on price. This is what technocracy is all about, a resource-based economic system. Now, this is exactly what sustainable development is all about. You know that doctrine came from the United Nations over a period of years. We've talked about it many times in this broadcast. Sustainable development is an economic, resource-based economic system modeled after historic technocracy. It's the same thing. People that argue with me say, well, how do you know it's the same thing? Listen, in the history of the world, there has never been another economic system developed to compete with free enterprise. It's just never been done. The technocrats in the early 30s were the first ones to put it down on paper, and they did so very succinctly. It's very pointed. All the research is there now. We know where it is. I've been to it. I've visited all the archives that have information on historic technocracy, and I know exactly what they were doing back then. It was a very popular movement in America and Canada. And so when the United Nations got a hold of this doctrine and called it sustainable development, it really didn't change the essence of it. But we need to see the comparison between the two. And I want to just quote you a couple of different short blurbs out of my book, Technocracy, The Hard Road to World Order. This is in the first chapter. Is called Technocracy is Sustainable Development. From the book, Our Common Future, that was edited and mostly written by Gru Harlem Brundtland in 1987. She was also a member of the Trilateral Commission. She wrote this book for the United Nations, and it later became the basis for the Agenda 21 document that was produced in Rio de Janeiro at the first Earth Summit in 1992. She wrote, "Sustainable development is development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs." Now, there's no political verbiage in here whatsoever. It says sustainable development is development. That means business development, not political development, that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of the future generations to meet their needs. And then she goes on to explain further, in essence, sustainable development is a process of change in which the exploitation of resources, the direction of investments, the orientation of technological development, and institutional change are all in harmony and enhance both current and future potential to meet human needs and aspirations. This is where sustainable development was introduced to the United Nations. Now, early Technocracy stated, and this appeared in the Technocracy study course that appeared on page 232, early Technocracy stated, quote, "There must likewise be continuous analysis of data and resources pertaining to the continent as a whole, both for the purposes of coordinating current and of determining long-term policies as regards probable growth curves in conjunction with resource limitation and the like." That is essentially the same thing that Gru Harlan Brundtland said in Our Common Future. This is not a mystery. This is identity. It's an economic system. Now, when the United Nations held the so-called United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, on February 3rd, 2015, Christiana Figueres held a press conference in Europe. Who was she at the time? Well, she was the executive secretary of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. And during that press release, she said the following, direct quote. I listened to this interview myself. It was in English. I watched her lips move as if she did it. She said this, quote, "This is probably the most difficult task we've ever given ourselves." She's speaking for the United Nations here, by the way, which is to intentionally transform the economic development model for the first time in human history. This is the first time in history of mankind that we're setting ourselves the task of intentionally, within a defined period of time, to change the economic development model that has been reigning for at least 150 years since the Industrial Revolution. That will not happen overnight, and it will not happen as a single conference or on climate change, be it COP 15, 21, or 40. You choose the number. It just does not occur like that. It's a process because of the depth of transformation. Now, this woman, who was the head of climate change in the United Nations, declared war on capitalism and free enterprise. Can you see that? She said, we're going to replace it all. There's never been any other economic model since the beginning of the last century, for sure. And she says, in any case, that this is the first time in human history that anybody's ever attempted to give us a new economic model. And well, what is that economic model? Well, it's sustainable development. That's the only offering they have. They want to exchange capitalism and free enterprise for sustainable development. It is an otherworldly economic system that I believe, with my economic background, I believe is doomed to fail even before it starts. It's like matter and antimatter. Every time sustainable development meets capitalism, free enterprise, a corruption occurs, gangrene sets in, and it doesn't end up well. So if they're successful, if the sustainable development crowd is successful, the entire world will be devoid of free enterprise and capitalism. And, oh, by the way, they want to do away with private property altogether. They say we don't need to own private property. They will take care of all the ownership of property and maintenance of property and resources and so on. And they'll simply license it out to the people that they want to do the development. This is the essence of sustainable development. It is not a political system. It is an economic system. Now, I've made my point here. I've driven it home as much as I care to today. But as we talk about these individual little grains of sand, like we're going to here with these 3 articles posted today, when we talk about these little things, these individual things, you need to remember we're not bashing technology. We're not trying to just pick on some particular point and say, oh, this is going to end the world right here. That's not the point. The point is all of these little things are part and parcel of the larger thing of resource management, an economic system based on resource management. And it doesn't matter whether the resources are timber or farming, food, medicine, gold, silver, oil from the ground. It doesn't matter what the resources are. We also need to remember that in their mind, in the technocrat mind, people are resources just like all the other things of the earth. They look at people as just another resource that needs to be balanced. And so humans are not elevated at all. They're just considered like so many cattle in a feedlot. And you see this mentality peeking through all these stories. That's why we put these stories down and document them so that you can see with your own eyes how this mindset works out in real life. Our first story today is titled, Cities Are Adopting Real-Time Facial Surveillance Systems. Now, I've hammered on this probably for the last 6 months. The Chinese-style surveillance, and China is a technocracy, by the way, China-style surveillance is coming to America. People still have their head in the sand on this. They're asleep at the switch. I guess maybe there's some concern, but nobody's concerned enough to do anything about it. They figure, well, let somebody else do something about it. Well, in this case, this story is interesting because it says that Chicago, in particular, and Cleveland is in this story too, both of which have purchased real-time facial surveillance software that's almost identical to what's being used in China. I said this would happen. And you know what? The company that sold it to them is an American company. They're based in Greenville, South Carolina. That's right. Good old US of A, American ingenuity. They developed this software. I don't know the history of it yet. I'm going to do research on it, but they've developed this software that can be sold inexpensively now to police departments in America. And it includes not only the camera technology, but as well the software behind it that can simply just see people walking down the street and boom, you're identified. Well, how can this be done in America, you say? What about the constitutional protections we have? What about the Bill of Rights? What about the right to not be searched or have property seized, etc.? The data is your property, by the way, and taking a picture of your face is searching you. What happened to all those things? Well, you won't believe this, but the fact is there is no national legislation whatsoever blocking this kind of technology from being implemented in America. Not one. So companies like this one in Greenville, South Carolina, have carte blanche to sell as much of this stuff as they can to police departments across America before there is national legislation, if there ever is, as a matter of fact. There may not be, but there is no legislation now. There's no law or statute blocking police departments across the country from implementing this technology, unless there's state legislation or local legislation. Now, I'll point out here, again, we just talked, I think, last week about San Francisco having banned this kind of technology in their city. Liberal, over-the-top, leftist San Francisco. Don't ask me why, how, or they came to this conclusion, but they did. They blocked facial recognition software. This proves my point that local activism is the only way to fight technocracy effectively. Your city, wherever you live, city or town, if it has a city council, it has the ability to issue binding legislation, resolutions that can be upheld in court, that can block this kind of stuff and stop it cold, dead in its tracks. Other cities have done it. Most cities and citizens in most cities simply don't get it, that they have that power in their hands. And like places like Chicago and Cleveland now will have these systems implemented, and they won't have a clue how it got there when they finally wake up to it, nor a clue how to get rid of it. In fact, it may be impossible to get rid of it at that point if it's already been implemented, in place, and upheld in court somehow. So America has a lot of work to do on this if it wants to do anything at all. But right now, Chinese-style surveillance is coming to America. And this article is worth reading just for that, just so you can understand what's going on. The name of the company, by the way, in Greenville is DataWorks Plus. DataWorks Plus. And you can go check out their website. They sell a lot of different things, not just this one product for facial recognition. But they do sell to police departments across the country. That's their market. And you know they have good salesmen. They're going out there. If they can sell something like this to Chicago and Cleveland, they can sell it to anybody. So when you see salespeople from this company show up in their pinstripe suits, you better look out because they're bringing Chinese-style surveillance to your city. Now, along with this, it's interesting that the New York Post, which is a rather major publication in New York, just published an article today called China's Social Credit System is a Dystopian Nightmare. This book review actually is based on a book by Stephen Mosher, but he's the guy that wrote the article as well. More major publications are picking up the idea of what's happening in China with the social credit system. This is a system of managing people. Remember, people are just resources. To a technocrat mindset, people are just resources, and they treat them like resources. So the social credit system in China is merely a social engineering tool to micromanage the people. And here we have a major story in a major publication, relatively major. New York Post has been around for a number of years for sure. And public awareness is growing. That's my point. People are catching on now. China's doing this. It's not good. It's not good for the people in China. And it's certainly not the American way. And yet, if you were to compare this article to the first one that we referenced, the cities are adopting the same kind of technology here. There's no connection. Not connecting the dots. These dots desperately need to be connected. Okay, the last story today is about robots. The rise of hotel robots in Seattle are very disturbing to hotel workers, and they should be. The technocrat mindset, by the way, is to invent efficient technology that will displace inefficient humans. Remember, just resources here, but there's no substitute for real human interaction, is there? The sales pitch is typically, always, that robots will improve the workplace. But instead, they displace workers altogether. How can that improve the workplace? Get rid of the humans. The robots are cheaper. They never ask for overtime. All you have to do is grease them and oil them once in a while and maybe reboot their software. But, much cheaper than humans. So if we're a resource-based economic system here, it makes a lot more sense to use robots than it does those pesky people who are always like getting in your face over schedule changes and, they go on strike and they want higher pay. And we just get away with that by getting a robot. Well, these workers up in Seattle are concerned about it because there's an Embassy Suite Hotel up there. It's a very large chain around the world. Has introduced, let's call them delivery robots, that can take things from a central location up to a room that maybe they ask for a towel, extra towel or a pillow or something like that, or shampoo. Well, the robot is programmed simply to just take it up there, and the guest can go out and pick up his material, whatever it might be, from the robot. Well, this is a major function, of course, that used to be reserved for actual human beings. Good evening, Mr. Smith. Here's your fill in the blank. Not anymore. The robot will sit there and blink at you, and you won't even have to say thank you, nor will you have to tip him. You just take it and send the little robot on its way. Well, yes, this is happening all across America, and hotels, not just in hotels, all kinds of other areas as well. But you need to remember, if you analyze the jobs in a hotel, there are a myriad of jobs that can be done by robots, and they don't need humans. Now, it's true, so far, you don't have a robot that can make a bed. But you do have a robot that can vacuum a room, and you do have a robot that can make up drinks in the bar, and you do have robots that can open and close the door in the hotel coming in, and you do have robots that can now run and push luggage carts up to a guest room. Hotels could be largely peopleless in the end, and robots could be doing almost everything. This is why workers in Seattle are freaking out, because they're watching the robot do jobs that they used to do, and their jobs are in jeopardy because of it. That's just the way it is. I might add, just kind of in closing, that the technocrats' answer to all this job displacement let's do universal basic income. Let's just give those people that are displaced money. That'll shut them up, and they won't have to come back and destroy our robots or make a big protest or anything over it. Let's just give them money, free money. We know that they may not be able to get a job anywhere else because, after all, if you work for 30 years as a bellman or in the hotel industry, and all of a sudden you're displaced and you're out on the street and you don't really have any training anywhere else, you may well be one of these people they're going to call the unemployables, those who can't find work and never will again. Those are the people that they seek to use universal basic income to placate. Just give them money. That'll shut them up. Well, they're wrong about that. And so far, in every experiment across the world on universal basic income, they've all failed. That does not deter the technocrats from continuing to push it, because they are. Well, that's enough for today. A look at technocracy in the world today. I'm Patrick Wood for Technocracy News and Trends. Have a great day.